When I was learning to drive a car, right, I was very inexperienced, right? So if you put this into context, I'm at UB, very little outside life experience, student from birth, no like jobs, no experience with any technical things other than maybe, video games or something like that. And you get in at the car and then you realize there's like a mind shift change, in the sense that your brain has to be active constantly, right? There's no pause button. There's no second chance. You have to be very decisive and in the moment and precise, right? And so the thing with driving a car is that, the more you just develop in general life experience, or the more I became proficient at driving, I saw that bleed into other aspects of my life. And so the better I got at driving a car, the better I got at music. I was able to maintain focus for a long period of time, to abstain from making mistakes, to make quick decisions. And so that's the thing, is that driving a car and music, I found to intertwine, which goes into this idea that we spoke of before, of music being something that encompasses every aspect of your life, right? Mm-hmm. Music isn't something that's like a portion of your life, or that it's something I do on the side. No. Music, in a sense, is the purest expression of the self in art, And, I feel like visual artists might say the same thing about painting, or you as a dancer would probably say that about dancing. And so it's a very personal thing. But for me, I would say that music is the purest expression of the self. Because you could tell when somebody isn't being authentic, in the way they play. You could tell if someone is just playing
notes.
Mm-hmm, if they're not really playing what's in their head, if they're just all about technique, if they're just about reproducing something that already exists. It's the same thing, and I would say that music is the same thing like language and speech. You could tell when someone is a great speech writer, when someone is excellent at giving their own speeches or reciting a speech that was written for them. And the presidents, they all do this. All the great presidents, they have their speech writers, but the way that they deliver the speech is so true to themselves, and it delivers the message in a way that the person who wrote the speech, could not. And so I'd say the same thing about music. Like, the way someone plays, you could tell a lot about that person just from that, from the way they play. And this is something that I really discovered when in August, not August, it was in July. When in July, I brought Russell Hall, who's an amazing bass player. He's one of the top bass players today in New York or globally. And he really taught me that music takes your entire life, right? When he came to my home, he stayed with me for a few days. From he came, he was singing, he was playing all my guitars, he was on the drums. And when I saw this, I realized if I want to play like Russell Hall, it wouldn't be listening to his recordings and transcribing what he played and trying to sound exactly like him. If I wanted to play like Russell Hall, in a sense, I would have to become like Russell Hall.
You have to live his life.
Which is wild, which is like a gypsy, which is, some might say a bit too much. But when you listen to him, that's exactly how he plays. He calls himself the wild card, right? But it's also very beautiful. He's a guy who believes in love. He talks about love. He talks about life. He's a very deep guy. And his playing is beautiful and very deep. But it could also be very wild. And that's exactly who Russell is. And so he taught me that the way you play is really about how you live your life.
So how do you play?
That's an excellent
How do
question.
you live your life?
How do I live my life? This year, I would say, has been like a breakthrough year for me. And thinking back,
Lots of things have happened
lots
this
of
year.
things have happened this year. It kind of feels like everything has happened so fast. Every few months there's something new. The thing is that my band, we've been together since 2019, formed at UB, and we've slowly been developing the style of music, jazz, and this year, I told myself that we're going to be serious, in April, we had our first concert right here at the Bliss on that stage behind us with my good friend Nathan Graybeal, who's a YouTuber. He has, I think, a couple 100,000 subscribers. He's very popular on YouTube. He does like saxophone content, comedy skits, stuff like that. Very much a funny guy, silly guy. He came to Belize. I asked him to come, and that was kind of, I think, the first time we put ourselves on the Belize scene in like a serious way, and to just not just to put ourselves on the scene, to say this is the style of music that we play and that we want to play. And some people misinterpreted what I did and said, oh, so your idea is that you're going to bring foreigners here to show us what real jazz is. Is that it? And if you notice the marketing, it's consistently said Loreto Pelayo Quartet with Saxologic. Music, in a sense, is a selfish endeavor, because people say, is music for the listener or is it for the player? But the first listener is the player. And like I said, you play the way you live your life. And so I want to get better at this music. And so the way to get better, other than checking out the recordings and, like I said, living your life, is to play with people who are better than you. And this fact of the matter is that there's no one else in Belize who's playing this music at like a serious level. There might be people who now and then dabble in it, or who say that they play, but it's, anybody who listens to it could tell that this is not the style that I'm looking at, right? So it leaves me with two options: go to New York or bring New York here, which, I've done both. And so after that concert, which I'm glad I introduced a lot of people to jazz who said that they wouldn't like it. A few weeks later, I had a trip to New York and Philadelphia where I really immersed myself in the jazz scene. I went out to the shows. I sat in on a few jam sessions. I took lessons from my heroes like Pasquale Grasso. I've consistently taken lessons with him on Zoom, but this was the first time we met in person. And he's one of my biggest influences on how I play and how I want to play. You ask, how do I play? Our first lesson on Zoom, he asked me to play, and I play for him. And he says, do you know chicken? I'm like, chicken, yeah. Your playing is kind of like chicken, but it doesn't have the seasoning. So we're going to help you put the seasoning on the chicken. I'm like, okay, that's good. There's something there. He said I had a nice sound, but it was lacking a lot of things. One thing that music has taught me to do is to just be very open to criticism and growth, because if you're a very stubborn person, you're just going to play sad perpetually. You know, if you say, well, this is how I play and I don't care what anybody says about how I play, you know, which you do need an element of that, because there are always going to be people who are going to tell you that they know better, you know. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So you always have to balance the two. But in the face of a guy like Pasquale, I'm not going to say, well, you know, I'm not really sure about it. It's like, he's saying I need this stuff. I need to put it in the playing, you know. All of these things have just happened this year, and it's been, in a sense, a lot to process, because the growth has just been consistent in a short span of time. It's really like a blessing, you know, like a blessing from God that all of this has happened, because it all started, you know, with Nathan. Funnily, we used to talk about Christianity a lot. He would ask me, you know, questions about the Bible, and we would spend hours on like a Zoom call, just like, you know, talking about this stuff. And so all of it, in a sense, seems very providential, you know. When you're trying to do something, there are always going to be detractors, no matter what it is. So one of those problems is just dealing with people who don't understand what I'm trying to do. And you know, I really appreciate that that you have me on Beyond Basic, because I feel like I'm one of those people that you don't really understand unless you sit down and talk to me. Because if you just clip me out of context, you could have taken like any clip from the past 10 minutes, clipped it out of context, and interpreted it in your own way. But if you sit down and talk to me, you'll realize a few things: that I love this style of music. I want to play it to the fullest. I want Belize to enjoy it.
And you're willing to do anything to get better at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't think that those are bad qualities, you know? And that is just something I'm deeply passionate about, you know? And that's all there is to it, you know?
Something that intrigued me when we were talking about this interview. So you said earlier that the way that you play is defined by how you live your life. Everything in your life will affect the way that you play as an artist, as a musician, the way, if you are a visual artist, whatever it is. And so you are a Catholic, a devout Catholic. Yeah. You recently reverted a couple years ago, had an intellectual conversion first, from what I understand, right? And then you came into the faith. And so you're not just a jazz musician, but you're a Christian jazz musician. And so if what you said is true about how everything in your life affects the way you play, then there has to be some element of your faith that somehow affects the way that you go about playing, the way that you see things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, a lot of artists, because we talked about this, that secular art or secular people have dominated the art scene in the world, in Belize, in the world, in mainstream media. Most of the popular artists, the popular movies, everything is secular, doesn't really have Christianity kind of at all in it. And you were talking about why that is and how, just all that stuff. So talk about that a little bit.
I feel like a lot of Christian artists, Catholic Christian artists, whenever they enter into any creative sphere, it becomes very difficult for them, for a lot of reasons, you know, internalized guilt, a whole lot of things, to just be themselves and be true to themselves and to unleash all of that in their art, you know? Not saying that this is widespread or that this is like 100% thing, but just my general observation has been that, you know, certain people are just afraid to admit how messed up their life is. And if it wasn't messed up, then why are you seeking God, in a sense, you know? Because, you know, we've talked about this before. One of the tough things about being young and in the church is that, you know, you're 15 to 27 years old, you've made a lot of mistakes in your life, or you know, you're only like a quarter way through your life. Obviously, you have not been perfectly sanctified as yet, but you go to, for example, Divine Mercy Church, you see all of these pious old women, and they expect you to be as though you are 80 years old. You've lived your life of debauchery and sin, and you're ready to give that all up, and now you're just a perfect, holy little 24-year-old, which is not the case, for a lot of us. Maybe the sins aren't, sins are bad, but everybody has their struggle, and I think in a sense the excessive piousness kind of leads to one of two things. One, young people just determining that maybe church is not for them, or maybe it's for them after they've decided to settle down, or when they're about to die. Is this famous thing? I just have to confess before I die, and then that's it. The fallacy of such. Or you enter into the church, and then you feel like you need to jump from a 0 to 100. From I'm a wretch, Lord save me, to yes, yes, yes.
Like if there's nothing left to be saved.
Yeah, it's like there's no process, which is kind of my, we've glossed over the fact that I've done, or I once was part of Guadalupe Media, and I kind of experienced that as well. I recently reverted to the faith. You graciously recommended me to do the feature stories on Guadalupe Media, and then it's kind of like, wow, I jumped from being a recent revert to being kind of like a public figure in the Belize Catholic media scene. That's kind of a tall order, which is kind of why I'm kind of glad I stepped back a bit and that I could just be a guest on Beyond Basic, is that it's easier to just accept your faults when you're not a public figure in that scene, and so like when it relates to the music and the art, you ask how this affects how I play. Well, I would say a couple things. For one, it occurs to me that beauty is a matter of objectivity. This is such a controversial take for a lot of people, especially in the arts, because you'll hear like the most avant-garde stuff and it just doesn't sound good, and then someone, beauty is in the eye of the beholder or whatever. But it allows me to just listen to beautiful music and acknowledge that that beauty is derived from somewhere. It's the fact that this beauty, and however complex the music might be or beautiful it might be, it's like this comes from a source, in almost like a Platonic way, in terms of like Plato and the forms. It's like, if this music is an instantiation of beauty, what is that beauty itself? Like where is the source of all of that? Because we play all of this stuff, or people play this stuff, or paint this stuff, or you watch like a beautiful sunset, and it's like that's an instantiation of something. And so I would say that my faith allows me to seek after the beautiful. I think beauty is something that's very important to me, in the sense that it gives seasoning to the chicken, it gives flavor to life, it gives something that keeps us moving upward. I think if the beautiful is eradicated from life, that just dulls existence infinitely.
This is a personal opinion, but I think in the Christian art scene, something that we have lost in recent generations is the ability to create new things that are pure creativity, I would say, because for centuries Christianity has has been the kind of torchbearer when it came to art, when it came to beauty, when it came to architecture, music. We have influenced so much of culture for centuries. And then all of a sudden, now what we see is secularism has taken over mainstream, but also Christians are afraid to create. And if they do create, it is a secular thing wrapped in a Christian like wrapping paper, instead of something that is entirely new, that has its own, like it's just pure creativity.
It's like youths of the world, look at me, come, enter the church. We have all of these things you like.
Yeah, it's like, you know, we have that, like that the world has, we have it too, but just Christian. And
yeah, I think it makes Christianity worse and that thing worse.
Yeah, that's Michael.
It's not Michael Knowles. He's quoting I think like King of the Hill or something like that.
Oh yes, yes, he is. Yeah, that quote of yeah, it's Christian rock. It's Christian rock makes both Christianity and rock worse.
It does though. It's so true.
And so yeah, I think that's kind of a trend that we have been hopping on these past couple of years of, yeah, we have to, you see the, and I mean, it's for some people love it. Some people love it. Some people love the, let's take Ed Sheeran's music and change the lyrics and make it Christian. Or let's take the exact same style of music that's being produced in mainstream and just change it and make it Christian, or whatever it is. Let's mimic the world. And maybe there's a place for that. Maybe that works for some people, but for a long time we never did that. That was never a Christian thing. We never felt like we had to do that. And when we spend so much time doing that, then we lose the space to be able to create new things and to create a culture that is entirely Christian and that is entirely other, which was the goal of the early church, was the goal of Christianity for a long time. I mean, the early church wanted to set themselves apart from the pagans, wanted to set themselves apart from Judaism. They wanted to say, we're different. And then this beautiful big church was created that it's completely different from anything else that exists on earth. It still is, you know, it still retains that character. We're still when a good example, when Pope Leo was elected, it's like no other religion has that, you know, what we had, like the conclave and stuff. We still have retained a lot of that. Nobody has the St. Peter's Basilica has the kind of influence that we have. But
the aura.
I guess so. But at the same time, that's because we're holding on to the things that were a product of Christianity being separate, creating its own thing, of Christianity moving in its own path and its own trajectory, instead of hopping onto the mainstream path and saying, hey, look at us, we're just like you, but Christian this time. And so as artists who are also Christian, we have a unique role in that we're not so much competing with the seculars. It's that we have an advantage already, just because when we create, we are directly tapping into the creator when we as Christians create, because we already have a relationship with the creator. And so when we're able to make new things as a fruit of that relationship, instead of trying to piggyback off of what other people are creating apart from the creator, then the things that we're able to do will have so much more depth and so much more meaning and so much more beauty. But like you said, it's the way that you live your life, and it's the way that you live your life. Because if you live your life in that way of, I'm gonna live a secular life but insert Christianity into the places where it's easy and convenient, then your art that you create is it'll be secular, but I'll insert Christianity in the places where it fits. But if you live a Christian life, then your art is going to be pure and new and just Christian. And you won't have to, because you can tell when someone kind of is trying to fit something in that doesn't really belong there. And that's why sometimes the whole Christian rock or whatever can be clunky, because it doesn't fit. It's two things that are kind of they don't fit together in a natural way, and so it can be a little bit clumsy, a little bit cringe, and you can pick up on when it's clumsy and cringe. But when you're able to just create out of a pure place, which you alluded to earlier, and you said that sometimes when we come into the church, we feel like either oh, I can't live up to what is expected of me, so I must leave the church, or I must not, or I redefine Christianity. Or you have the other option of, I have to pretend to be something that I'm not. And you have this false piety, and so you live in that way. If you live that false piety, then your whole everything else in your life is going to be it's going to be a hypocrisy. Your whole life will be a hypocrisy. So your creations will be a hypocrisy. It won't be pure, and then people can sniff that out. That's an inauthentic expression of yourself because you don't even know who you are. You're not even admitting to yourself what you are, what you struggle with.
There's this great book that I like checking out. It's called Daily Rituals. I think the subtitle is How Artists Work. And this book kind of is like a compilation of the different great artists from like the past 400, 500 years in Europe. There's a couple Catholics in there, I think like Liszt. But the thing that you notice about how they live their lives is like Liszt, for example. He would go to mass every day. He would wake up, I think, like 4 in the morning. But the rest of his life was kind of like messy. You know, I hesitate to recollect it because I'll probably like miss a part of it or remember it incorrectly. But all of these artists, even the very religious ones, had a tough life. They might have been alcoholics, or they had serious problems with insomnia, or different problems in their lives. And I kind of think that being an artist kind of opens yourself, or not even open yourself. It almost feels sometimes that that's a prerequisite for the job. It almost feels like only somebody with that type of mind, that type of spontaneous life, that type of constant need of saving would come up with these types of ideas. When you look at these different people, or you look at who's the guy that did all those paintings in the Sistine Chapel? Was it Michelangelo? Somebody.
I don't know if it was Michelangelo or Da Vinci.
One of them. But you look at their lives and they're not necessarily clean, but their artwork has kind of become one of the most prominent paintings in Catholicism and Christianity. Which is that these are not perfect people, and in some cases not even good people, but the art they create inspires so many people and draws them to the faith through the beauty.
Yeah. Well, you're able to capture the human experience and to touch human hearts if you are attuned to your own humanity and not trying to live like an angel when you're still a human being.
Yeah.
And the devil, and we talked about this too, where the devil will come into and attack anything. And so an artist who has to be open, who has to be honest, he will attack that, if you're a secular artist, by making you feel like you have to be a degenerate, you have to be sinning in vice. He attacks it and makes it ugly and makes your life ugly so that your art can be authentic and true. But then if you are a Christian, I think that it's the opposite attack of, he's going to make you feel like, oh, because I'm a Christian, I can't be honest. Because I'm a Christian, I need to live this ideal. And that then it limits you and it stunts your creativity and your ability to be creative. And then your art's not good. It's not good if you're stunned, if you're being stifled, because then you can't be free. You have to, in art, it is not formulaic. It's not A plus B equals C. And so because of that, you have to be able to tap into something you have to tap into a transcendental.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to tap into a transcendental, you have to be free. And in order to be free, you have to, as Catholics would say, you have to be virtuous, because to free is to be able to, choose the good. But you also have to be honest, and you can't be living you have to be rooted in reality.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be living in an ideal. And, people talk about the Catholic guilt and the fact that, and I think that's what it is. It's just this acknowledging of how do you balance striving for virtue,
Mm-hmm.
striving for virtue and avoiding vice, hating sin, not wanting sin, but acknowledging that you're still a sinner and that's still a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the conclusion I would come to is you have to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You have to acknowledge that you're struggling. You can't pretend you're not struggling, and you also can't stop struggling and say, well, it's okay. It's okay if I, living in vice. It's okay if I never change. It's okay if I never get better because Jesus loves me. That you have to live the struggle, because this life is about the struggle. That's the point of this life, is to struggle and struggle and struggle until you get to the beatific vision. Hopefully you've struggled enough that you are perfect. But before that, it's a struggle. And if you pretend like it's not, and you pretend like you're already at the beatific vision, that is opening the door to so much more than just you make bad art if you're an artist, but also your life will be completely, you will miss the point of your life. You miss the point because you're not acknowledging.
I would say the thing with that is, like we mentioned, it's a lifelong journey, and maybe it is like what you said. A lot of people who are in these messy lives are very in tune with their own humanity. Um, I feel like a lot of great art. I'm just kind of reiterating myself a bit here, but I feel like a lot of great art comes from these messy people. It's hard to find an example, but maybe you could prove me otherwise, of someone who just like had like a very clean life and made very profound and lasting art, and that's kind of what the struggle is for me, in the sense of I'm no Charlie Parker, I'm no Thelonious Monk. I'm just trying to sound good, right? But all of these guys who are considered like the top of their field came out of a very specific, and the thing is, you can't separate like the time that they lived in as well, because for a lot of these people, like a lot of the early jazz artists, they came out of like a very oppressive society for them. A lot of them were black. They needed special cards to perform in venues, or just general level of prejudice and mistreatment. And so, I think some of them, they were working in coal mines, harsh conditions before they performed their music. And so their music, in a sense, was an expression of their deep struggle. And so maybe then it would be more to say that it's difficult to be a great artist without having a deep struggle.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, I don't remember who said this, maybe but beauty will save the world. That's like a...
Dostoevsky, the Eastern Orthodox writer.
Yeah. So, he said beauty will save the world. Do you have any insight on that quote? Like, how would you explain that?
Well, I think at like a purely theological level, you'd say that Jesus Christ is beauty. But also that I think the natural world, Thomas Aquinas says is that we could deduce the existence of God just from the natural world. And I think one of the things in the natural world that invite us to God is beauty. I've talked about this before, in the sense that, just like the experience I've had, you see a beautiful sunset. I think it is God speaking to you. You hear beautiful music, it's God speaking to you. And so I think when people are exposed to the beautiful, their lives change. I think that ugliness pulls people to more ugliness, and that beauty lifts people up. And I think that by inviting people to take part in the beauty of the world, I think that touches them more than a lot of other things could. I think, like, for example, the beauty of the Catholic Church draws a lot of people in. When they look at the Catholic Church and they have this beautiful architecture, the interior is very beautiful, beautiful artwork, or even like with the Eastern Rite, with, like, for me, the beautiful icons. They watch it, it's beautiful, they want to be a part of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's like a first step that lures people into that path.
In Theology of the Body, John Paul II says he's talking about a person in a romantic relationship, but that it's the raw materials.
Yeah.
Like when you, like, that's not the point of is like to marry somebody beautiful, because one day they get older and beauty changes and whatever it is. But it's that first, God creates this beautiful exterior to draw us in, to have that raw material, that initial attraction, so that we can get to the depth of the other person, to get to the depth of what it means to enter into a relationship with another person. And so it's the same, with the church. When you, not just the visual, physical beauty of, if you have a beautiful church, but if you have the beauty of its teachings, the beauty of the truth that we proclaim, the beauty of even the structure of the church, and the thought of the church, the mind of the church, everything about the church, when you are able to encounter the beauty of Catholicism in its truest form, that initial attraction draws you deeper to say, okay, there has to be more here. Even if when you start to come to Catholicism and you start to see, wait, this all makes sense, this all is very much in line with what it means to be a human being. This church and its theology understands the human condition. It understands what it means, but it also calls higher, and it points to a transcendental reality that is coherent and that is beautiful. And so then, what more can I get from this? And then you ask the questions, and you're able to be drawn deeper into this religion, despite the ways that humanity may mess it up. And I guess that's another thing that relates to what we said earlier about with the church, right? People might say, church is not perfect. The church, there's this scandal, there's that scandal, there's this and that and the other. So why would you be Catholic if it's not actually that beautiful? And how do you explain the, whatever people may have issues with? How do you explain the scandal? How do you explain the people that misrepresent the teachings of the church, or not? Or how do you explain that my parish doesn't have a good choir and the priest is not very engaging, so why would I be Catholic? I don't find beauty at my local parish, or whatever it is people may make excuses for. But even if the reality of it is, even if the raw materials are missing, they shouldn't be missing, but if they are missing by whatever unfortunate circumstances causes them to be missing, the depth and the actual beauty of it is there. And so for a Christian, it is we have a duty, I think, to transmit the beauty of the Catholic faith to people, because we know the beauty of the Catholic faith. We, as Christians, we have it, we possess it, and so we need to transmit that. We have an obligation to transmit it. But for the non-Christian, there is, in that sense, like, to say you're not at fault if you don't see the beauty, because then it means that we as Christians haven't been doing a good job at presenting the beauty. But also, like, there is still the depth, even if there's not the beautiful, like, veil on, or the packaging that should be there, that historically has been there on the Catholic faith. Even though that's not there, the truth of it is still there. The doctrine and the what the church teaches, it's still beautiful, even if it doesn't have the beautiful wrapping on it. And that is what we hold on to, and that is the hope that we hold on to.
You mentioned thing about, oh, maybe my parish doesn't have a beautiful choir or something. I've almost reached the point where it might seem contradictory because I'm talking about the beauty that draws us in and all of that. But, at certain parishes, you might have some people who maybe objectively are not great singers, but they're dedicated to it. They feel like they're giving a service to God. They're always there. They're always willing to help. And, some people might look at that and say, you know what, they song bad. We need to replace them with someone that songs good. We're all about letting this choir be beautiful or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, for like a parish, which is kind of like a mini community of its own, I would almost feel like it's better to have the people there who are doing it for God, and that they'll be there long term, than to like artificially give the impression that this is a reflection of this parish, And so I think maybe that's like a beauty that comes from a sense of honesty, like you walk into a parish, it's like, these are our parishioners. She doesn't sing that great, but she's trying. And this guy that's playing, he's here. And that's like an honest and true reflection of that parish.
That's a good point.
And I've kind of come to terms to accept that with beliefs. Like I used to say that, oh, I want these beautiful churches with this great music.
Schola Cantorum.
Yes, but it's like, does that reflect us as like a church community in Belize?
Yeah.
I don't think it does, and it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. It's like, okay, we're gonna have all this extremely beautiful stuff to draw you in, and then then what? You get to know.
I guess it's again going back to the honesty, like you said, of when we are able to, what are we capable of doing as a parish, right? Whatever parish you belong to, what are we capable of doing? Instead of thinking, well, this very successful parish in the States or wherever it is does all of these things, they have all of these ministries, and that's how they get people to come to church. And so we need to have all of those things too to get people to come to church, even if we don't have the capability to do it, and we're going to sit and complain until that happens. It'll never happen. Versus being able to say, this is what we're able to do. These are the people in our parish, the individual people in our parish who have these individual gifts, and we're going to use them and support them in using them. And when they're able to flourish in whatever gift that they have been given, because this person has been placed in our parish by God to help build it, that God will use the two fishes and 5 loaves that we give him in that sense to create a flourishing parish, to bring people to him nevertheless. And so sometimes we come up with these ideas of how the church is going to be better. Everybody has their opinion on how the church is going to get more people to come, how the church is going to get the youth, how the church is going to get people, the random person on the street who has left the faith since being confirmed or whatever it is. Everybody has their own ideas. Every single last one of us has our own ideas. Even if you don't want to admit it, you do. I have mine, you have yours, so does the parish priest, so does everybody. But at the end of the day, sometimes we'll say things like, if we had a better choir and it was like a rock concert in mass, it would be great. Or if we had more traditional music and people were able to, then that's what's going to get them. If we had more beautiful sanctuary, then that's what's going to get people to come back to church, if whatever it is. But if we don't have but then we're forcing people into roles that they don't belong. And we're forcing people, we're like, well, I don't care if you're not good at doing this thing. You need to do it because this is what we need. And you have to be, you have to find a way to fit this mold because somebody decided that this was how people are going to come back to the church. And then you have a very, again, clunky, clumsy way of evangelizing. Instead of saying...
I feel like you chase people away like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because the people who are doing it are not fulfilled in doing it because they're doing something that they don't feel like they're naturally being called to do. And then the people that are receiving the service that this person is providing, whatever ministry that is that this person is leading, then they don't feel fulfilled in either because this person clearly is not doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a clumsy way of going about things instead of having each person be the part of the body that they are called to be. And I have come to the conclusion for my own self that each person has an obligation to find out what part of the body of Christ you are. What is it that you bring to the table? If you don't know that, and if you don't live that, like if you are not the thing that God wants you to be, and the thing that you're not bringing to the table what God wants you to bring to the table, what He made you to bring to the table, you're doing a great disservice and violence to the body of Christ. Because then now, if you try to be another part of the body that you're not, and this is in the Bible, you try to be another part of the body that you're not, then who's going to do the job that you are equipped to do, that God is giving you the graces to do, when you're trying to do a job that you don't have the graces to do? That's missing. And so you are doing a violence to the body of Christ when you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, when you're not living honestly, when you're trying to be somebody else.
But with all these frustrations, I guess just the fact that Christianity is true, keeps, I guess, myself coming back.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of problems, but like you mentioned, part of life is the struggle. You can't eliminate the struggle. The struggle is part. It's part of being human.
Yeah. Another thing is God doesn't, there's a whole thing of God doesn't call the equipped, He equips the called. And so, yeah, none of us are equipped to, do whatever ministry it is that we're supposed to do. But He does, when He equips us, the talents that we have, that's how He equips us. It's the things that we are passionate about, the things that move our hearts, the things that we want to do. That is how He equips us. And so we have to use that equipment. We have to use it, right? It's not to say that, I don't feel like doing that, even though I'm able to, or it would be good if I did that thing. We are to serve, and we are to use our gifts and our talents, and to, as Christians, bring what we have to the table. We are supposed to do that. But it needs to be in the way that God is calling us to do that. Like, we can't have our own little agendas of what that means, and we also can't have other people tell us how it is that we're going to be using our gifts. And so, yeah, we have to, that's part of what it means to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Part of the body of Christ. Well, thank you, Loreto, for joining us on the show today. Thank you for talking about your artistry and about jazz, and for making again an appearance on Beyond Basic. You were once a host, and now you're
I've been demoted.
I think you've been promoted. I think when you're a guest, then you get to shine more. You're the point of the episode. You are the main attraction of the episode.
Yeah, that's true.
You are the attraction. Your name will be, before, when you were a host, your name wasn't on the thumbnail. Now it is.
That kind of makes it worse, That means that whenever when I go do a gig in the States and someone's looking up my name, then this is going to be what's up there.
Yep. So I hope you said it. I hope you're proud of everything that you said. I hope you have no regrets. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for watching Beyond Basics so far. We encourage you to go back and watch previous episodes if you have not, and to continue to watch future episodes as we release them. Thank you. Have a great day and God bless.